up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of pldViews. First in a couple weeks, and a show that was meant to be weekly. It's been a little bit less, so I do have to apologize for that. I've been very busy in my life as well as my streaming life as well. So this has been kind of cut to the put to the wayside a little bit more than I'd like, but I'm definitely back for another episode here, getting our way through the weekly series of the show V. If you've ever watched V, it's one of my favorite sci-fi episode or sci-fi franchises of the 1980s. Basically, a wonderful miniseries, a decent follow-up miniseries, an interesting weekly series, and then beyond, we're going to get into the reboot as well as the books, the comic books, and all things V, as I still hold a lot of nostalgia for it, despite, as we're going to find out in today's episode, how bad it kind of got at times. This was not a good episode. We'll get right into it. This one is the 12th episode of the weekly series. This one was called The Betrayal, written by Mark Rosner and directed by Gilbert Chilton. Originally aired in January 18th of 1985. And this is what I would consider to be the linchpin. It's kind of a strange thing. I say this is where it all starts going downhill. Now, ironically, I actually like the next episode a little bit better. It's actually one of my favorite episodes of the weekly series. But this is still the one I point at as the steps towards no return, so to speak. Too much had already happened in the weekly series, as I've been telling you. One of my biggest things about the weekly series, the fear of the visitors have been taken away. They try to address that with this episode partially, but I don't think it's where they want it to go. The writers, it's hard to tell from back in the 80s. I've read a lot of interviews. It's hard to tell exactly what went down, but the major thing I've always read about, cost cutting. This was the highest the highest costing weekly series on TV at the time. It wasn't getting the ratings. The ratings have been sinking because of some poor writing choices, because of a lot of different characterizations did not make sense at times. It was just kind of more turned from a sci-fi, almost horror adventure to almost like a soap opera with laser guns. It still had its ups and downs. It still had some of the great characters. It had potential to be salvaged. I do feel that I will argue that to my dying day, that this could have been salvaged. This was not the way to do it, though. At this point, they decided they had to cut costs in so many different ways. We already saw the beginning of the end when Elias was killed very unceremoniously last episode. I ran about that a little bit. And this is where we lose a lot of cast members in one episode. So much so that the next episode had to start with a new intro with the cast and everything else, because it was all different at that point. We open up with the Howard K. Smith, as they had been most of the series so far, talking about the state of the war around the world. And this is also for the last time. This is one of the cost cutting we had. Howard K. Smith's openings are no more. That I understand. If you have to cut costs, the directive from NBC was to cut costs at that point. This is one of the things you can take out the newsman from around the world. I liked it. I think it added great depth to the series. I think it was a nice little touch. But honestly, every day it had nothing to do with the episode. So you're going to cut something out. Okay, I get that. I like it, but it's understandable. Then we break into the topic of the first part of the day. We start with our man, Willie. Willie, the long-time alien who had been a sympathizer, turned into resistance, basically, who now is living amongst the resistance. He is also getting more involved suddenly in the actual day-to-day fight. Now that the Club Creole is no more, I'll get right into it. There it is. Boom. He gets shot right in the beginning as he's getting information from the fifth column, from the alien turncoats, about Charles and Diana moving weaponry into the quote-unquote open city. And this was actually scary. And I'm telling you right now, right there at this point, when people are starting to die, I was like, they're going to kill off Willie, for Christ's sake? Holy crap, what are we getting into now? He gets shot. He makes his way back to the resistance, but in a bad way. I want to put this out. This is where cost cutting starts getting really bad. They actually use a scene from the last episode. Like, it's a long shot of him running through the streets, and it's the exact same shot from last episode when Willie runs away from Elias. They flipped it a little bit, but you can tell it's like a totally different. You can tell he's got a black jacket on and everything else. The new other shot, he has like a brown jacket on from the episode. It's pretty pathetic, to be honest with you. But again, they're trying to cut costs, and they're doing it in ways they only know how. But stock footage becomes huge throughout the rest of the series. A lot of times they start repeating things, and sometimes it gets blatant. That actually is not the most blatant. There's one that's coming up in a couple episodes, which made me laugh so hard that we'll get to that. We'll get to that. So when he gets back to the Resistance, Elizabeth and Julie start trying to save him. They're working on him, trying to stabilize him. Of course, Julie says that she hasn't worked on visitors. She doesn't know enough about visitor anatomy to save them, which makes sense. They can't really work on them. Although, when you've been working with an alien like Willie, Martin had been in her care for a bit. Like, you think by now she would probably have learned a little bit, enough to do more. But it makes sense. She was never a full-fledged doctor that way. She went more into research and things of that nature. So that becomes the new plot point. Donovan and Ham decide to go get a visitor doctor to help save Willie. They end up kidnapping one that ends up being only a medical student. But he's a great character, a character named Howie, which I really dug. Howie, I got to admit. Howie was a great character. He ended up being a fifth columnist, and I want to see more of him. Unfortunately, that wasn't going to be the case. It's unfortunately one and only time we ever see him. But he had some humor to him. He had some. It was a little bit different than Willie, different than Martin, different than any of the fifth column we've seen before. I made jokes with them about when somebody had jokes like John Langley, the new guy, came up and joked about frying lizards in his dreams and how he would step right to him. He was like, pan fried or deep fried? It was like one of those great back and forth. It's actually a good representation of the writing of the episode. They had some good moments. I would love to see more. Unfortunately, Costco's not going to do that. Speaking of John Langley, his part of the series keeps going as well. He's been a most interesting character after one episode. He comes back. You see him meeting with Diana. Obviously, at the end of the last episode, we revealed that he was actually a visitor in sheep's clothing, so to speak, without the voice boxes, without the talking that they had in the miniseries. It's much easier for them to infiltrate the Resistance. He goes back to Diana that he meets. I love about the character. He's kind of like this loner kind of character, even though he worked for Diana. He's working his way through. He doesn't tell Diana where the Resistance headquarters is because he knows Diana's going to bob him or take him out. He doesn't be taken out if he's inside. He's smart that way. It's an interesting dynamic. I mean, now, does that work for the Diana? Diana would probably torture it out of him if he really wanted. But at the same time, Diana wants Robin impregnated. Robin, having the Star Child, is the only one that's ever been able to mate with the aliens. We got the Star Child with all her magical powers. Of course, you want to get another one, someone you can take under your wing and use against the Resistance, so to speak. So that's Langley's plan. Or Langley's mission, rather, and Diana forced him to do it. He doesn't want to do it, which is very interesting. It's not this Langley's not this evil, gung ho. It's good to see not mustache twirling kind of thing. He actually shows some hesitation for his plans. Like, he's basically doing his job. He does it well, and he will do his job when he needs to. But he doesn't really want to do much with it. He actually wants to leave and go back home at that point. But Diana kind of forces the issue, and he's professional, so he'll do his job nonetheless. He's a good character, though. I really like seeing Bruce Davison in this role. Again, another one that I think I could be wrong. I don't know. This is not fact. I don't take this as fact. I almost feel like this character was written to be a more longer-term arc. Maybe about the half of the season kind of thing could have been a thing. But then they put him in that first episode, and I think the directive came down not too long after that to cut costs. And so Langley at that point became, we'll cut him down to a single arc instead of a more long-term goal, which is unfortunate. I do really wish we had gotten more from Langley. We'll talk to him about him more a little bit in the episode as the episode goes on. But there, Donovan and Ham get Howie. They bring him back, and Howie works on them. Works them over. They do this big blood transfusion. And Howie has to talk Julie through the surgery because she's the only one with alien blood. So the only one who can give the alien blood. Meanwhile, there's a side plot that's introduced. It's very important towards the end. Kyle Bates is watching his father as he appeared last time. Nathan Bates was appearing on the TV screen. It was a computer program written by the aliens to make it seem like he was still in charge. Well, really, Charles and Diana were in charge via Mr. Chang, who is a very easy to control puppet at this point. But Kyle's not buying it. He wants to go to Science Frontiers and figure out what's going on. At the same time, Bates, the real Bates, does wake up from his coma. And of course, Chang realizes that he could be done if nothing takes place. Because he finds out what Chang's been kind of giving in to Diana and to Charles. It's not going to be a good thing. Yeah, Diana and Charles. Haven't seen that episode before. So haven't seen episodes before this one. That's what the aliens are called. Diana's always been the big baddie. They introduced Charles the second big daddy because it's 1985, and who better than Charles and Diana, right? Either way, we go into the Science Frontiers, and Charles and Diana suggest to Chang that maybe the city would be better off without Bates since they've been going so well without him. And Chang, of course, is easily controlled, easily taken care of. So he definitely just goes, okay, decides to kill Nathan Bates. But first, before that happens, Kyle gets in there. Kyle gets in and visits Bates, who's waking up, and Bates is very weak. Bates is very, he doesn't know what's going on at this point. He says that, go back to that in a minute. He has Kyle to his face, tells him he wants him to take care of things and try to make sure things are out. But when Nathan finds out that Kyle has not been brought by Chang, Nathan really cunningly realizes that if Chang hasn't brought him, then Chang's going against him, and that's over. So Nathan tries to get Kyle to go out. It's this really great moment, probably one of the best moments in the series, and probably Nathan Bates' best moment. It's kind of a little bit of a redemption arc for him. He really has. He's shown that he loves his son, and he knows he made mistakes. He admits he's made mistakes. He admits he went for power, and he did a lot of wrong things to get power. But at the end of the day, he wants his son out of there, wants his son saved, no matter what happens to him. Kyle, of course, refuses. Kyle tries to get Bates out. Walks him through Science Frontiers as much as he can, and confronting Chang. Now, Chang ends up shooting Bates and killing him. There's another one down. Another one bites the dust there. Nathan Bates done. Again, now that the open city has been a concept has been done, it makes sense that he'll get rid of him. There's nothing more to his story without the open city. Nathan's not really needed at some point, although I would argue that it could have been better. It could have been better, Nathan, to actually living through that and trying to join the resistance after what he did could have been a very interesting dynamic. But the worst part about it to me is the piss poor writing. In one of the first episodes we discover, when Diana comes back to the location, comes back to Science Frontiers after escaping Bates' control, Bates shows the pulsometer and says that if his pulse is to stop, there'd be some kind of big destruction. The red dust would be coming down again and killing all the visitors. It'd be such a hard concentration that the visitors would die within a million. Whatever. It's still kind of big, long, explosive device, basically saying that it's going to be his or no one, so to speak. And Julie asks him in that same episode whether he was bluffing or not, and Bates says, "Oh no, he doesn't bluff. He plays to win." Not only does he do that, but very early on the episode, he talks to Kyle, and they mention this. He mentions that if his stops, there's some kind of concussion device all over the country or whatever, or over the city rather, and then he dies, and then nothing happens. Wait, what? Then why ever talk about it? I mean, I could almost understand if they decided like that when they wrote at the beginning of the season they didn't want to have happen, but they could have written their way out of it instead of just like almost ignoring it. And then you mentioned something, and then it's still nothing happens. What the hell is going on? It's like one of the worst. It's awful. I'm not gonna lie. I did read later on there was actually a scene shot where Bates slips the pulsometer from his wrist to Kyle's, and I don't know if they wanted to do anything with that. Maybe they didn't want to have Kyle really. Burdened with that for the rest of the episode. They don't want to write anymore, but god damn, that's awful writing. I mean, I love this show. That's awful writing. Speaking of awful writing, I really hang on this episode. I hate this episode for a lot of reasons. There's a lot of good into it, but there's a lot of crap in it as well. I'll go back to that picture I skipped over. It has in the wrong order. There it is. We got another example of fucking Elizabeth. Just using those powers as a crutch. So the operation goes down. Howie does his best to save him, and still it's not enough. Eventually, Willie all of a sudden dies. This big commercial, big horror. Also, Willie bites the dust now. You lose, and Willie's going to be the next one to go. But no, not this case. What happens, just like the final battle, basically, that power she's using right there, same one as when she stopped the multiple bomb on the mothership. Placed her hand on it, everything lights up, and everything's back to normal. So now she can use her mind. She can she can use her photographic memory. She can telekinesis. She can float, make things. She can do so many things in her mind. Basically, if the scriptwriter needs something done, Elizabeth can all of a sudden do it. There's no limit to her powers, and there's no reason why. Now, I don't mind a lot of that sometimes when you have a chosen one and you have some kind of superhero, but just because she's made it between an alien and a human, all of a sudden she's a Jedi. And even more than Jedi, this is actually like a Rey saving Kylo years before. It makes no sense, but it happens. It happens, and that's where we're at. And so once again, you find I don't like the Elizabeth character. She's such a crush, and she's such a waste of space to me, and nothing to do with the actress. I love Jennifer Cook. I love her in Friday the 13th, Part 6. She's great. but it's just not a good character. It's so easy to be a crutch for them to use. I wish if they had, I think they could have done better with her if they had. I don't even mind her having power necessarily. You could say Diana's experimenting and something to do with the DNA. I don't know. You could do something, but like make them specific, consistent, and give her something to work with instead of like developing this like goddess like state. And then they kind of try to touch on she's the one of the visitor religion, but then that just seems like the whole thing just seems pretty ridiculous, to be honest with you. It never really works. Maybe if they had gotten more time, if they had developed it further, a possibility could have gone somewhere. And there was a potential plan, which we'll talk about at the end of the series. I talk about what would have happened next from what I've gathered from different sources I've read. But for this case, it's pretty shitty. Going back to Science Frontiers, Kyle basically stalks down Chang after Nathan's death to get revenge. Kyle and Chang have an altercation in Science Frontiers. And there goes Kyle. Kyle takes care of Chang and kills Chang. And there goes that. Once again, I don't know bites and dust. If Bates is gone, there's no reason for Chang to be around at that point. Chang was nothing but a puppet and didn't work out. So in one fell swoop, we decided, okay, the open city is gone. We don't need Science Frontiers. Basically, we don't need Nathan Bates. We don't need Chang. We're done with that saga, and it's all over. So the end of the day with that, the rest of the episode regards this plot of the visitors moving in weaponry into the open city. Of course, at the end of the episode, it makes it pretty pointless because there is no open city at the end. But it does happen, so it makes sense. They decide they have to attack this place where they have this medical center where the visitors have been holding up some large cannons, everything else. Howie goes with Donovan, Ham, Robin for some reason decides to go on. Why? Because you need her there for the end. Basically, that's the only reason why. Julie goes, and they all decide to. They have to take care of the weapons that are in there, make sure they don't get out. Meanwhile, Robin and Langley. Well, they do consummate after Langley tries to force the situation at one point. A little rapey, but I guess it makes sense. It's okay if that's episode because he's an alien. He's a bad guy. He's supposed to be trying to force the issue, so it makes a little sense at that point. What doesn't really make sense is Robin coming back a couple hours later and, oh, I changed my mind. Yeah, we're good. So either way, but that's another scene. We go back to the ending there. Donovan and company are in there. They take care of business. That's when Howie finally recognizes, they laid some groundwork earlier on where Howie kind of thought he recognized Langley from somewhere, finally realizes that he's one of Diana's crewmen. Of course, I love that idea. First of all, Howie's a medical student. He's going to realize one of Diana's top assassins. He's going to recognize who he is, especially in a human mask, because he knows all about what human masks everybody wears, right? That's always some of the best unintentional humor throughout the series. The aliens know each other. If you and I were to go ahead and wear masks, would you recognize me? I don't think you would. Like it makes no sense, and it's even worse later on. They double down on it. They triple down on it. There's something upcoming that really triples down on it. It's awful, but again, we're gonna get there later on. The end of the episode happens. Howie figures out who Langley is. Langley knocks him out. Langley takes Robin hostage in this horrible moment where Robin realizes she's been duped again and she's been screwed again, literally screwed again. Luckily, Howie comes to, saves the day. Langley is killed. And again, this is where I think Langley would have possibly made it longer if the cost cutting had been dictated by the NBC execs. But Langley's done, unfortunately. Now, at that point, that would be the end, you would think, right? Not too bad. You lost a lot. Elias, actually, you lost last week, rather. You lost Nathan Bates. You lose Chang. You thought you lost Willie, but not really. And then the ending happens. The ending scene where everybody else decides to leave town. I guess it makes a little bit of sense. Some of it does. Robin decides to leave the Resistance and go to Chicago, where the Red Dust still holds true. She doesn't want anything to do with the visitors anymore. She's been duped so many times. She wants to go where her family is. They made mention at one point back in the first episode that's where Polly, her other sister, her sister's Polly, and I can't remember their name now, but they were in Chicago with their aunt or uncle. So Robin's going to go there. So please take Elizabeth with you, right? Just take Elizabeth with you. It makes sense. Elizabeth's only freaking like 2 years old, even though she's in an 18-year-old body. No, because Elizabeth is necessary. So Elizabeth's going to stick around in a war-torn city because she likes Kyle, because her and Kyle have begun this like budding relationship like a couple months ago. Really? That's what the mother's going to do. We're going to leave Elizabeth behind. I know it's weird because it acts like this adult at this point. She's acting more and more adult, but it just doesn't make any sense. Robin and Elizabeth should have gone together. And I would like that because Elizabeth to me was done. But the worst part is that Robin doesn't go alone. She takes Ham Tyler with her. What the why are you cost cutting with Ham Tyler? This is the worst decision they could have made. Ham Tyler was easily one of the most fan favorite characters in the show. He was one of the most interesting characters in the show. He actually made such a different dichotomy, different dynamic between the dynamic between Donovan and Ham, Julie and Ham. He was that other side, that bitter, cynical guy you need to have. So it's not all goody two shoes. You have the fight between Resistance because Ham and Tyler is there. He makes the show work at so many different levels, and the Resistance, and V finds that out when he leaves. I got to be honest, he finds out. They try different things later on. It's never quite the same. They almost try to put Kyle up in that role sometimes, but that doesn't work. They give Kyle the same machine gun that Ham has, and they have the leather jacket, but he's just not cool. He's not cool like Ham. He's not like dark like Ham. You need that dark, cynical side to balance Donovan's light side. I mean, Donovan has a dark side too at times, but it's mostly Captain America. Julie's got a dark side because she was converted a little bit, but there's so much that you could have done with Ham Tyler, and Ham Tyler leaves, and it's like, what? I'm silent because I'm pissed. This is the one that pisses me off the most. He's one of my favorite characters growing up. He's one of my favorite characters still. And the series never really truly recovers without him. Also, I didn't even mention he takes Chris with him. Chris doesn't even make it to the episode to say goodbye. Unfortunately, I'm like, I like Chris too. I like him and Chris's interactions as well. They made for a good duo, dynamic duo. But they just mentioned it as a throw off. Ham said we're going to meet Chris at the Mojave cutoff, or whatever, either way. So Ham, Chris, and Robin go off to Chicago, leaving the Resistance behind. It is a great goodbye moment. Donovan and Ham, I'm showing it there. They have this moment on screen where they realize their differences, and they realize they definitely have a grudging respect for each other. And Julie asks if they're ever going to see him again. And Donovan's like, you don't know. But so that is a touching ending between them. But it's overwhelmed because I just hate that it had to happen for cost cutting sakes. There's so many more people I would have cut before I would have cut Ham Tyler. But I would have cut Kyle before I cut Ham Tyler easily. Kyle and Elizabeth could have gone as far as I'd rather have the Resistance be Donovan, Ham, and Julie, and then whoever else they need that week, or with Willie or whatever. But they made the choice they made, and it's unfortunate. Interestingly enough, we do get a little more of Ham Tyler in the other media. There's the comic books actually took a little arc of what happened here. They take there's a small arc we'll get into later on where Ham, Chris, and Robin are on the road together after they leave this moment. There's an interesting dichotomy there. And Ham actually was almost brought back twice. So not the last you've heard of Ham Tyler, but is the last he's actually in this weekly series, unfortunately. But that's where we end this episode. I'm going to do something I haven't done in a long time, going back to my character database to touch base on some of the characters throughout the saga. This is something I've done for a while now, but I haven't done recently because I'm trying to space it out a little bit, trying to make sure we don't run out of things, and I want to do it when they made sense. I probably should have done this one last week, but let's get into the Taylor family. The Taylor family. As Elias was killed off last episode, this seemed to be a nice way to get into this story here. Elias Taylor was portrayed by Michael Wright, and he was in the original miniseries. He was in the final battle, and he was in pretty much, I think, every episode from episode 1 to 11. He also made his way into a handful of the novels, 5 of the novels. He was in a couple of the comics, and just so we know, there is one more big Elias Taylor story again in the comics. The last two comic issues from the series was a flashback story involving Elias. So it's not the last time we've seen Elias, the Taylor family, but it is a fun character. And he was very important in the beginning. He was this kind of street criminal. He was one of the ones the Resistance kind of brought in. You see his aspect. It was kind of fun watching him with the cop characters, Brad and Mark. They had this interesting dichotomy there. And he was brought on because of his brother getting killed. His brother getting killed in the initial raid. But Ben and Julie were the really first part of the Resistance. Let's get him on screen so you remember him. I don't remember him very much. He was only in the original miniseries. Benjamin Taylor, the doctor. When he was killed by the visitors, trying to make a raid, their first ever LA Resistance raid, where they're trying to raid the scientific equipment for the camp that they were going to kind of create to try to study the aliens. Ben had gone to Elias and asked for help, and Elias had kind of blown him off, saying, "Hey, I'm making money now. The aliens aren't bad for me." But this showed this great moment where he gets killed. Also, and it hits close to home for Elias, and Elias joins Resistance after that. Of course, after the initial miniseries and final battle, Elias celebrated and does his own thing. He actually, they mentioned during his little eulogy that he definitely made his mark and got paid. He had a brand of footwear. He had a movie. He opened up a successful restaurant. But when the aliens came back, they used the restaurant as the base of operations. So he was still a Resistance member at heart until the Curl was destroyed. At that point, it almost became unnecessary to have him around because he almost wasn't the same character at that point. He wasn't a street rat anymore. He was just this entrepreneur businessman, and he didn't really have a place at that point in the series. So I kind of understand why they took him out. At the same time, it was just kind of unceremonious, and I wish it could have been different. But back to Ben. Ben, like I said, he wasn't around a lot. Actually, I'm sorry. Let me go back to Lash real quick. I should talk about the other timelines. Other timelines he was in. He wasn't actually. You didn't actually find out what happened to him in some of the other timelines. For example, we're going to break down V: The Second Generation eventually, which was Kenneth Johnson's novel, which took place after the original V and retcon the final battle, retcon the weekly series. You'd think you would find something like that, but Elias, at the end of the first miniseries, had sent off the signal with Julie to the enemy of the visitors. That's the last you hear of him. He's not even mentioned in the Second Generation. Which we'll get into a little later on, I think, also partially because there's a character in there that kind of replaces him. Second Generation does do that a lot. The Second Generation did that a lot. It took a lot of the character archetypes, and they used the old characters, and if they didn't, they decided to use these newer characters as in place of, so to speak. So he's not really around for that. But he does have a couple of cool arcs in the comics and in the books, so we'll get into those eventually as well. Ben Taylor was portrayed by Richard Lawson. Or did I say last? Portrayed by Michael Wright? If I didn't, he did. Michael Wright, great actor. New Jack City. He's in a couple other 5 Heartbeats. He's got some good performances and some good movies. Not very well known beyond them, but he's a smaller actor, smaller part actor. But he's really good. He actually has a lot of talent in him. So Ben Taylor is played by Richard Lawson, who I don't know if I saw him in much else. He didn't recognize, didn't throw anything to me. Nothing came to me when I thought about it. He didn't have much. He only had that one moment in the miniseries he gets killed, and that's what spurs Elias to join the Resistance. So, end of him. Important character, but small. And finally, we have Caleb Taylor. Caleb Taylor played by Jason Bernard. Loved him in Herman's Head. Loved him in a lot of things, actually. He plays a lot of character roles in TV and in movies. He was a great character. He was in both the original miniseries and the final battle, and a couple of novels and a couple of comics. Never was in the weekly series. He was the original cost cut when they pared down the Resistance to a little bit of a hardcore feud when the weekly series began. Caleb didn't make the cut, unfortunately, and I wish he did. I kind of liked him a lot. Like his relationship with Elias was always kind of a great moment when they had this father-son. Ben was the favored one. Elias was this kind of disappointment, but Caleb always tried to make it known that he loved his son still. And they had a couple of great moments, especially in the final battle, where they fought, but they respected each other. Caleb was always very fun. He was a very fun character. He was older. Supposedly, at one point, they try to say in one of the books that he had arthritis and couldn't really fight the battle anymore. But he was a great timely great character in the beginning. He had a great arcs with Willie. Showed his bigotry towards the alien race in a way. It was a little interesting having the black man be racist towards the alien race, as far as like them stealing their jobs and things of that nature. It was interesting to see. His resentment was clear, but then he eventually learned and he became friends with Willie. It was he had a lot of great arcs in terms of interrelationships, and he was a fun character as well. So I like that. Again, he did, and he was also not mentioned in the Second Generation. No idea what happened to them there, but he does have some arcs in the books and the comics. But you can read those later on. But that is where I'm going to end today. We've gotten through the Taylors. We've gotten through the episode. We've gotten through the place where now we have cost cut everything. And it's the beginning of the end for the weekly series. We have a few weeks left now, about 5 or 6, 7. I have to look up my book here. I can't remember now. Maybe 7 or 8 episodes left. We'll get into those. But next week, next week's I say next week because it's a weekly series. Whenever I do this next, hopefully the next couple of weeks I'll get another episode in. It's one of my favorite of the series. It's not that bad. I know I say this whole time it's all been shitty. It's been shitty and shitty. They try to start anew with something kind of cool and different. Unfortunately, it doesn't last very long. But next episode is one I'm looking forward to watching. Thank you very much for sticking around with me. This is a longer episode than usual. I appreciate it. So hit that like button, hit that subscribe. I know this is not an edited show, it's just me basically talking. I use no fancy editing. I'm not an editor. I just like to talk about my favorite shows. I'm going to try to start getting into a little bit more as soon as I can. Experiment. That's why the Harris Dons hasn't happened yet. I kind of want to make that a pre-recorded thing. I want to make that with some editing, some very small editing, because I'm not going to learn a whole lot in a short amount of time. Where I go through the Ed Harris movies. I want to do that still. I'm still working on how to do that best. If I can learn a little bit of editing, that will help me with that. Otherwise, you'll see me. You can also find me in many different places. Call to Action, where we after show for the movie Trivia Schmodown. You can also find me on Action Industries, doing stuff every week with them. I do a show called Class Action. I've been a little bit hard to schedule. My buddy Richard Eric Jarvie has been under the weather, so it's been hard to kind of make sure to get things going with that. Hopefully, we'll return next week. But yeah, so hopefully you guys like that. Let me know what you think. I'll see you guys next time. Hopefully be soon. I also probably do a live hang. I do those a lot of times, a lot of live hang for my members of the online community. We get together, we just talk shit about movies, TV, the Schmodown, whatever else we want to talk about. We did Star Wars trivia once. It's fun, but they're usually late at night, very late at night. So you have to catch them later on. But either way, thanks guys for hanging out. Much love. See you later, man.